Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Straits Times Education Forum 2019. This is the fourth year that Straits Times is partnering Singapore Management University to organize the Straits Times Education Forum, following the successful events hosted at SMU over the last 3 years. My name is Jeremiah. I'm a third-year student here at SMU, and I will be your MC here today. Thank you for attending this forum and taking time out to be here on a Saturday morning. This year's forum promises to be especially exciting, insightful, and thought-provoking as our panelists will debate the motion, "Entrepreneurs today do more harm than good." Now, before the debate, we had invited you to cast your votes on whether you agree or disagree with the motion. We hope all of you have voted, and we're excited to see what you think. Arguing for the debate motion today are Mr. Aral Balkan, cyborg activist and co-founder of Indie, Ms. Sumitra Pasupati, Ashoka Country Director for Malaysia and Singapore. Arguing against the motion are Associate Professor Reddy Kota from SMU Lee Kong Chian School of Business and Professor Timothy Clark, SMU Provost. Joining the debate today for the motion are our student speakers, Ms. Stacey Lee from Catholic Junior College and Ms. Eleora Joseph from National Junior College. Arguing against the motion are Mr. Chong Kok Leong from Ngee Ann Polytechnic and SMU alumna and founder and CEO of The New Savvy, Ms. Anna Hautanto. Our moderator today for the debate is Ms. Chua Mui Hung, opinion editor for the Straits Times. After the debate, Ms. Chua will open the floor to a question and answer session. You are strongly encouraged to join in the discussion, share your comments, and pose any questions that you might have to our panelists. So without further ado, I will now invite Professor Lily Kong, SMU President, to deliver her opening remarks. A round of applause, please.
Me? Yes. Mr. Warren Fernandez, Editor-in-Chief, Media Group, Singapore Press Holdings, and Editor of the Straits Times. Distinguished guests, colleagues, students of SMU, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. I'd like to bid all of you a very warm welcome to the 4th Straits Times Education Forum, organized by the Straits Times and Singapore Management University. Entrepreneurs today, from Alibaba's Jack Ma to Amazon's Jeff Bezos, and closer to home, Razer's Min Liang Tan, are universally celebrated. The spirit embodied by entrepreneurs typically includes passion, perseverance, persuasiveness, adaptability, tenacity, confidence, creativity, and so forth. We hope that the innovation unleashed by entrepreneurs creates jobs, improves lives, and brings benefit to society. Yet, modern-day entrepreneurship may well have a dark side too, creating negative externalities such as stifling competition, crossing ethical lines, and breeding hyper-competitive cultures. Within this context, SMU is pleased to be partnering the Straits Times in organizing today's forum, themed "Entrepreneurs Today Do More Harm Than Good." Experts and academics are gathered today to debate on the good and harm created by modern-day entrepreneurs. And I've said good and harm rather than good or harm. This year's debate teams will include, as you've heard, student speakers from Catholic Junior College, National Junior College, Ngee Ann Polytechnic, and one of SMU's alumni entrepreneurs. And we're particularly delighted this year to have this additional segment. Would you give these new additions a warm round of applause? As a university, we recognize that entrepreneurship is changing the fabric of our everyday lives. Entrepreneurs who have achieved cult status with their successes are influencing the ways in which people think and behave. Through the robust arguments lined up this morning, SMU aims to contribute to deepening the discourse on the risks and gains that modern entrepreneurship brings. This brings me to talk about partnership. SMU deeply values that partnership that we have forged with the Straits Times, and all this, I think, helps us to leverage on each other's strengths and harness our shared goal of knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination. Following the first Straits Times Education Forum that was organized in SMU in 2016, I'm pleased that we have continued to work together to deliver 3 more editions. All of this, I hope, contributes to thought leadership to the issues that impact society. We look forward to further strengthening the relationship with the Straits Times, to continue bringing you insights on topics that are redefining the future of learning and jobs, and to imagine a better world in which to live, work, and play. One of the ways in which SMU strives to make that meaningful impact is through innovation. In 2016, SMU introduced a major in entrepreneurship for our students. It's a pathway for students who may be interested in starting businesses or social enterprises. It is also meant for students who want to develop the entrepreneurial mindset, who will know how to seize opportunities to innovate and create value for the companies that they will go on to work for. But more than just a major in entrepreneurship, I do want to emphasize that in all that we do throughout our curriculum, we try to embed the thinking about entrepreneurship, not just in terms of starting businesses or social enterprises, but in terms of thinking about how we might do what we're doing differently and better. And so it is a mindset more than just a business. In tandem with our academic curriculum, SMU's Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, or IIE for short, creates a vibrant and well-connected ecosystem to grow entrepreneurial talent. Students who are keen to gain exposure to innovation can sign on with IIE's Global Innovation Immersion Program, which offers internships so that students can be immersed in innovation ecosystems and entities with mentorship from industry leaders, some of whom are here with us today. Thank you for joining us. And a lot of this happens not just in Singapore, but also overseas. And these are mentorship programs, immersion programs, networking opportunities in places as far-flung as Copenhagen, San Francisco, Shanghai, but also closer to home like Bangkok, Manila, and Jakarta. Recognizing that global internships develop the desired qualities in our students, including qualities such as resilience, resourcefulness, risk-taking, our SMU Career Center, represented also by its director here, is placing an increasing number of students in innovative companies located in Southeast Asian cities. So it's both exposure to entrepreneurship as well as intrapreneurship for our students. And so our students have gone on to many companies in the region and further afield, immersed in these sorts of environment. Moving ahead, we aim to scale up these opportunities still more across our Datuk Koh Hui Ming Career Center, our Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, as well as another program that we have, which we call SMUX. And basically, our students go out there and are immersed in companies, delivering solutions and outcomes to sometimes long-standing challenges. IIE also supports SMU entrepreneurs through our Business Innovations Generator, BIG, or BIG for short. We want to create a place for students to test their ideas. The draft speech says a safe place, but I'd scratch out safe, right? It's just a space for students to Experience, not to be afraid to fail. If it's too safe, then they're not really going to learn, right? BIG is an equity-free incubation program that provides early-stage founders with key support activities, such as business model validation and fundraising advice. We pair founders with mentors, such as the very distinguished one seated in the front row here, and basically gives students models, people they can turn to. And in earlier conversation before this session, our entrepreneur in residence, Shirley, said to me that sometimes she gets WhatsApp messages from students in the middle of the night saying, "What do you think of this idea?" Right? Thank you for responding to our students. I'm very happy to say that the combined valuation of the fastest growing companies started by SMU alumni over the past decade is in excess of Singapore $3 billion. Similarly, students at Prinsep Street Residences, which is a new residential facility, well, it's not so new, but we have revamped it entirely in the last year. We've gotten students staying there who are fired up about startup ideas. And within this residential living and learning model, they have the opportunity to be with like-minded students sitting together into the wee hours of the morning, talking through ideas and how they might take those ideas to market. So whether it is entrepreneurship, business ideas, social entrepreneurship, Prinsep Street Residences offers an opportunity for students with, interesting ideas to be living and breathing those ideas together. SMU's location in the city behoves us to be engaged with the city. I think we're very privileged to be right here in the heart of the city, and we want very much to give back to the city in the same way that we draw from the vibrance of the city. So here in the heart of the city, we are building a new building right next door to this School of Law. And it's called the Tahir Foundation Connection. It will be ready by the end of this year. Between this building and the Tahir Foundation Connection is a bridge that we're building. And that bridge will be the innovation bridge for us, where we will have incubator space there, startup companies that are looking for space, hopefully from amongst SMU students, and I know we will have no lack of that, but also SMU alumni in collaboration with others around the city. So if you think that being in the city brings inconveniences, you don't have as many residential opportunities and so forth, scratch out those thoughts. Come to Prinsep Street Residences, come to Innovation Bridge, be immersed in this environment where we work with wonderful partners like the Straits Times to bring you interesting and exciting programs such as this. So in closing, I would just like to thank all our speakers for taking the time to share their knowledge and perspectives in support of this forum. I would again like to express our deepest appreciation to the Straits Times for making this forum possible. Thank you for attending the day's events, and so I would just end off by saying, please do cast your votes for or against the motion and raise your questions during the Q&A segment. Thank you and have a wonderful morning.
Thank you, Professor Kong. May I now invite Mr. Warren Fernandez, Editor-in-Chief for English Malay Tamil Media Group, Singapore Press Holdings, and editor of the Straits Times, to give us his opening remarks. Mr. Fernandez, please.
Good morning, everyone. Morning, Professor Lily Kong, President of SMU, Professor Timothy Clark, Provost of SMU, our very distinguished panel of speakers, my colleagues Sandra Davy and Chua Mei Hong, and from the Straits Times, and readers of our Straits Times who are here today, and ladies and gentlemen. It's always a pleasure for me to come back to this space in SMU because I went to school across the street, and this area brings back many, many happy memories of the kinds of learning and activities that took place here. So I was telling Professor Kong, what a joy that you have the building across the street, and it's being used for educational and learning purposes. But I'm also very glad to see so many of you here on a Saturday morning, and I'm very confident that by the end of the morning, you will be very glad that you came as well. And I say that for three very simple reasons. Essentially, we've been doing these kinds of education forums for a good number of years now, 4 or 5 years. And the reason we do it is very simple. We believe that in the changing the media landscape, the audience doesn't just want to read the news. We want to sort of discuss it. You want to have opportunities to engage, to try to help figure out things that are happening around you and make up your own minds. And we're very happy to engage in that process. And in doing so, what we have been doing in the Straits Times is investing in a core of reporters whom we call beat correspondents, people who are knowledgeable and authoritative in their fields who can then engage the audience like you. And in this regard, we're very fortunate to have Sandra Davy as our senior education correspondent. Sandra is someone who's been covering education for many, many years. She has seen policies and politicians come and go and things change over the years. And I can tell you, recently when we had the changes introduced on streaming, Sandra wrote the news stories, she analyzed them. We persuaded her to go on Facebook Live to discuss it and engage the audience. And in my job as editor-in-chief, I monitor and track which stories are being read, which stories are engaging the audience, which are sending them to the subscription shop, and eventually persuading them to whip out their credit cards to pay for a subscription, keep what we do sustainable. And her stories were one of the top stories for many, many days. So Sandra has she's been leading this effort to curate the content for this morning's sessions, inviting the speakers, framing the discussion. So thank you, Sandra, for the effort. I think you'll have a very good session as a result of her effort. And also thank you to my colleague Chua Mui Hong, who is moderating today's session. Her role every day is to curate and moderate discussions in our opinion pages and our platforms. So it's good that you'll be able to see her do it live and in person today. The second reason why I think you're going to enjoy yourself is the format we've chosen, which is this debate format. I've been a believer, participant in debates for most of my life, and I found it a very, very useful skill. The ability to marshal your thoughts, gather information, make an argument, listen to the other side, and then figure out what issues need to be addressed to help carry the argument through. I think that's a critical skill, especially in this day and age, when we're emphasizing so much on soft skills and not just the hard skills. And it's especially important in the context of all this fake news that we're having to grapple with. You've seen the legislation that's been proposed in Singapore, as well as legislation that has been passed in other parts of the world, like Australia. And we can debate the pros and cons of various parts of that legislation. But I think apart from just the laws, the critical thing that will make a difference in our ability to deal with fake news is having people and electorates with curious, inquiring minds, the ability to ask the right questions, to sift out what is true and what is not true, and then form judgments and form their own opinions accordingly. And debates like this help us in that process. I'm so glad that we've brought in the student debaters as well this year. You might not know, but you are in illustrious company. One of our top litigators, Devinder Singh, former debater. Our foreign minister, Vivian Balakrishnan, former debater. Indrani Raja, former debater. So you've joined a very prestigious and illustrious crowd. And congratulations to you, and I look forward to your contributions today. And the third reason why I think you're going to enjoy yourself this morning is the topic, this very provocative topic that we've chosen. Do entrepreneurs today do more good than harm? And that's the kind of topic we like in a newspaper because it's playing out against the backdrop of what's going on out there. The Financial Times has coined the term FANGs to refer to Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. And FANGs in itself is a kind of a loaded term to refer to some of the downsides that you're seeing emerging from these big tech giants and this tech lash that we are experiencing at the moment. To be fair, the tech companies have done enormous good for all of us in connecting us, in enabling us to communicate, but we are seeing some of the downsides at the moment, in terms of loss of privacy, the data being stolen, the sort of filter bubbles we find ourselves in. the ability to manipulate public opinion and shape democratic debate, the kind of broadcasting of terrorist acts as you saw in New Zealand. So all those also need to be weighed up in the scales. Another example would be the experience we've had with car sharing and bike sharing. All good things, in the sharing economy. But also, as a downside, you see the push to grow market share and drive up valuations, which make you wonder about the very meaning and purpose of some of these companies. So I think those kinds of issues are some of the issues we are likely to get into the discussion this morning. I don't want to preempt it. It's just to set the context. But I think you will enjoy the discussion, as well as to see how opinion shapes and forms as we go through the course of the morning. So I hope you enjoy yourself. Let me just conclude by thanking the SMU for your support and partnership over the years. SMU has been a wonderful partner to work with, and we're so happy to continue working with them into the future. And let me also thank all of you for being with us here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warren Fernandez, for the opening remarks. I would now like to invite our panelists and moderator to take the stage, please. Ladies and gentlemen, give them a big round of applause. I will now hand the floor over to our moderator, Ms. Chua Moy Hong.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the forum. Thank you so much for taking time off on a weekend to be with us. And to those of us who are watching us remotely on Facebook Live, a special welcome. Today's debate motion is an interesting one. We live in a world of disruption. Technological and economic disruption are upending jobs and lives. That's why the motion is worded in a negative fashion, that entrepreneurship do more harm than good. And importantly, the focus is on entrepreneurship today. It was the motion was actually written very deliberately and after much thought by Sandra, deliberately crafted to provoke interesting viewpoints. In the 19th and 20th century, entrepreneurship had a slightly negative connotation with robber barons, but throughout much of the 20th century, capitalism and entrepreneurship has been lauded. But these days, there is much talk about the excesses of entrepreneurship and capitalism. It's blamed for all kinds of things, from climate change, pollution, fraud. But also these days, as startups disrupt incumbents, many societies also tout innovation and entrepreneurship as the way forward for economies. So there are clearly good and bad points about entrepreneurs. But enough from me. The debate today, I'll just brief you quickly on the parameters of the debate. The debate has two parts. In the first part, we'll have two speakers who have 10 minutes each to speak on the motion. And we'll be alternating between those who support and those who are against the motion. The pair of speakers who are supporting the motion are two people who are mainly activists from the sort of non-profit sector. And then opposing the motion will be a pair of SMU professors. The bell will buzz when there are 3 minutes left, and then the last 1 minute. And then when the bell buzzes the third time, I think this is a buzz, okay. When it's time's up, I will just buzz twice, okay? So you know that the time's up. And after that, there'll be a pair of students who will speak on the motion for 5 minutes each. For the students, the bell will buzz once when there's 1 minute left, and then twice when time's up. And members of the audience, you get the delightful task of being able to press your button anytime you want, because that's when you can vote on whether you support or oppose a motion. And I understand this is on stage now, so those who support the motion, 27.9%, those who oppose the motion, 72%. So the proposition team, you have an uphill battle. After the debate concludes, I'll open up the floor to questions from all of you guys. I'm a lazy moderator, so I will just ask at most one question, and I'm hoping you guys will just step up. Okay, without further ado, I'll just call on the first speaker around, who, by the way, calls himself a cyborg rights activist, not a cyborg activist. I'll leave him to explain. Do you want to explain it yourself? Why you call yourself a cyborg rights activist? And this should not be counted in his 10 minutes.
Well, I
Very
basically, if you use digital and network technology today, I would argue that you are a cyborg, in that you extend your biological capabilities using technologies. And it's important for us to understand that so that we can expand our understanding.
Sorry, can we reset the timer? This should not count towards the 10 minutes.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go on.
If we understand that, then we can expand our understanding of what constitutes the person in the digital and networked age, so we can protect this greater understanding, which includes our technologies, so we can protect that within the context of human rights law. So I don't say that you have to be a cyborg. We need to protect your right not to use these digital technologies as well. But if you do use them, and can we do something about the microphone? Sorry, it's a bit tinny. But if you do use these technologies, then we have to understand that you're a cyborg, so we can protect your human rights. So what I mean by cyborg is a human in the digital and networked age. Does that make sense?
Totally.
A little bit.
Okay, over to you, Ara, to open your case.
Great, thank you. We have a problem, and that problem is surveillance capitalism. Capitalism is about the accrual of wealth. Surveillance is about the accrual of information. What happens when those who have accrued wealth invest that wealth in mechanisms of surveillance, which gives them intimate insight about our lives, which they then use to manipulate our behavior and thus accrue more wealth? We get this feedback loop that we call surveillance capitalism. And it's given us a world in which a handful of individuals know everything about us, and we know nothing about them. In the movie The Matrix, people live in a virtual space while their bodies are being farmed in a virtual space. Today, we live in the Matrix inverted, where we live in a biological space, but we're increasingly being farmed from a virtual space. And those doing the farming, like Mark Zuckerberg, will be the first to tell you that privacy is dead. But remember, he's talking about your privacy, not his. Because when Mark buys a house, he buys the 4 houses around his house because his privacy is alive and well. And yet, at his company, Facebook, he has 60 people working on literally reading your mind. And these corporations share this intimate insight with governments. Here you can see the heads of some of the top tech companies in the world sitting at the same table as then President-elect Donald Trump. And who you sit at the table with matters. Here's another photo. Tim Cook, head of a trillion-dollar technology company, sitting at the same table at Davos with Jair Bolsonaro, the right-wing, far right-wing president of Brazil. These photos have a habit of aging badly. Here's one from the mid-1930s. The older gentleman at the back is Thomas J. Watson, CEO of IBM, sitting at the same table as Hitler. Why? Because they were working together. In fact, they were working together so well that he got a medal from Hitler for services to the Weimar Republic. What was IBM doing? IBM maintained a customer site known as the Hollerith Department in virtually every concentration camp to sort or process punch cards and track prisoners, Hollerith after their founder. IBM engineers had to create Hollerith codes, print the cards, configure the machines, train the staff, continuously maintain the fragile systems every 2 weeks on site in the concentration camps. What kind of codes? 001 was Auschwitz. 002 was Buchenwald. 003 was Dachau. 3 meant that you were a homosexual. 9, that you were antisocial. 12, a gypsy. 8, a Jew. They also described how you were murdered. 4 meant an execution. 6 was special treatment, a euphemism for the gas chamber. Edwin Black, in his book, IBM and the Holocaust, says IBM and its president, Thomas J. Watson, committed genocide by any standard. But the most chilling part of it is, as he goes on to say, it was never about the anti-Semitism. It was never about the National Socialism. It was always about the money. Business was their middle name. Well, business is still their middle name, so what are they doing today? Well, they named their artificial intelligence after that CEO who was decorated by Hitler. They call it Watson. It turns out last month that they were working on a video surveillance program for Rodrigo Duterte, who had death squads in his employ. Turned out in 2015 that they were working with the drone program in the United States. And when asked about the Holocaust, their representative, their spokesperson, Carol Makovich, said, IBM does not have much information about this period. We are a technology company. We are not historians. Well, Carol, maybe it's time that all of us became historians to some degree so that we do not repeat the atrocities of our very, very near past. Because we're seeing developments. We're seeing how a tiny little company called Cambridge Analytica, with a minuscule amount of Facebook's data, could affect the outcome of the presidential elections in the United States and of the Brexit referendum in the United Kingdom. And we have to understand that Cambridge Analytica and Facebook have the same business model. Here's how it goes. Facebook has two audiences. They have their users, you, who don't pay them, and they have their customers, the corporations that do pay them. And here's how they make money. They track and they watch everything that you do, the data. They store that. They analyze it with their algorithms continuously to create a profile of you. And that is what they monetize with their customers. I call this business model people farming. They are factory farms for human beings. And it is a greater system that starts with venture capital. It involves startups, exits, clouds, unicorns, and Ray Kurzweil's church of exponential growth. If you want to know how I feel about these things, I created this illustration of a cloud throwing up a rainbow onto a unicorn. But it's that last bit that scares me the most. Exponential growth in a finite system, because this is how it works. You take a petri dish, you put some nutrients in there, you put some bacteria, you seal the dish. Generation upon generation, those bacteria will consume those nutrients, and they will grow, and they will reach their most successful state right before they go extinct because of lack of resources. If I need to spell it out for you, the petri dish is the earth. We are the bacteria, and that is the problem. So if we want to move beyond the problem, we need to do the opposite of what we're always told we need to do. We need to think small. We need to think not about growth. That is the problem. Let's not celebrate the tumors. We need to think about degrowth. In technology, this means talking about what I call small technology. Technology for the common good, that's owned and controlled by us, not these corporations. Technology that respects human rights and human effort and human experience, ethically designed technologies. Today, all of our technologies interact to some degree with this centralized web, with the Googles and Facebooks, these factory farms. We need to replace that with something. That's what I'm working on right now with a project that I call Haifa at our not-for-profit. Imagine a world, an internet, where we all had our own place on the web, and where we could use that to communicate with the people we care about privately without a Facebook in the middle. That's what I'm building. And one of the first components of that is a personal web server that I've created. This is not even released yet, but I want to show you a quick demonstration of how quickly I can set up a site. So I'm just going to go to my demo site right now, and you'll see it's trying to connect. There's nothing there right now, okay? So I'm going to go into my server. I'm just going to connect to it, to my demo.site, and now I'm connecting to that server over here. And I'm just going to create a website right now. Let's just create something where we say font size. Let's make it a big message here. And I'm going to say, let's say small technology. I love small technology, okay? So I'll say small tech, and I'm going to go H1, and I'll close that. I'll write that into an index file. I've created an index HTML file. Now I'm going to go to Indie web server, which is the site for the web server, and I'm just going to copy this line of code here. That's all I need to paste in here, and that's going to install the web server, and then I'm going to run that web server. I've just installed it, right? And now I'm running it, and it's running, and I'm going to go back to my browser to that page that wasn't able to connect, and I'm going to refresh it. First time it's going to take a little longer, and it's going to say, OK, it didn't work. All right. It's still in beta, but I'm working on it. So in a couple of days, that's actually going to work. And this is what entrepreneurship is about, right? It's about taking risks. And I am an entrepreneur. I've always been an entrepreneur. I've never taken a salary from anyone else, ever. And if I ever make $1 billion, I will have failed miserably. And I will never make $1 billion because you don't accidentally make $1 billion while trying to improve the human condition. I still have 40 seconds.
Yes, that's right.
We must redefine our success criteria. As Edward Abbey says, growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the cancer cell. Entrepreneurship is too important to leave to short-sighted business people who think it's the trick of turning a profit. We must reclaim what it means to be a successful entrepreneur, from someone who makes $1 billion to someone who furthers social justice and contributes to the common good. Because today, entrepreneurs do more harm than good. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Aral. And that was actually with about 20 seconds to spare. I realized that, I do apologize to whoever was monitoring the time. I forgot to press the buzzer. But as there's a counter, I'm going to change the rule. So I was just press the buzzer once when it's 1 minute before, and then twice. Okay. Now, opening the case for those who are speaking against the motion, Associated Professor Reddy Kota.
Ms. Hong, do I explain what an associate professor is?
Well, you can tell us briefly what your research is involved in about 30 seconds.
No, I won't talk about research, but I tell you, associate professor, once you make tenure, you get the happy opportunity to come here and serve the university and thank the university for the work you've done here. I thank my university for giving me the opportunity. Right?
Thank you for that. All right, over to you to start your case.
Okay. I'm going to talk that entrepreneurs do good. Right? And I'm going to talk through this by using a thought experiment. And the thought experiment goes like this. Imagine a country that's been split into two. And the country has equal resources, equal population, equivalent gender distribution. Right? And then you go 60 years later into time and you step into a time machine. One country outlaws entrepreneurship. The other country allows entrepreneurship to exist. What do you think you would find when you step into this time machine and visit this country 60 years down the road? History shows us whenever entrepreneurship has been constrained, societies do not develop. Repeatedly, we find this is the case through Middle Ages, through Chinese history, through Middle Ages in England and other places as well. Then, thank you for the straw poll. I also did a straw poll and Prolific asking 50 users. I didn't ask them leading questions. I said, what do you think entrepreneurs do? And I gave them the range of options. There's a high degree of overlap between the audience opinions and my straw poll, right? And I asked them, what would you think when you think about entrepreneurs, right? So things came up like innovative, creative, hardworking, motivated, driven. So this is to set up the space, and then now I'm going to step in and talk about a little theoretical model. Right? The theoretical model is like this. If I get everybody in the room to step into entrepreneurship, in a classroom, I would get every one of you to stand up, draw some chits, and then I would give you outcomes. That's too much to coordinate in a live event. I'm not as entrepreneurial in taking that risk that my young friend did. Right? So what I would like to tell you is the distribution of outcomes if all of us stepped into entrepreneurship now. About 30% of you would fail and lose lots of money. Another 30% of you would be better off working or doing your opportunity cost, doing something else than entrepreneurship. 30% of you do okay. You do okay, right? But is it worth all the pain, all the scar tissue, all the uncertainty, the sleepless nights our mentors and distribution entrepreneurs go through? Perhaps you are motivated by this. And about 10% of you do well. And when you do well, it's only the small percentage that does really well. Let me talk to you some salient points about entrepreneurship process, right? This is a theoretical statement, right? The median entrepreneur does not make money compared to her opportunity cost, right? The median entrepreneur doesn't, right? But still, economic theory would say, ex ante, you would you would get in because your expected value is high. But simple economic theory ignores that people have a need for steady income. I have to send my 3 kids to school. I have to put food on the table, right? And then it's the few who succeed that lift the distribution of entrepreneurs, society's returns. So why do so many entrepreneurs fail? Because some of them are overconfident. And this is something that brings back to us, especially at home, and I thank the editor for bringing this up as well, right? There's hail of bullets of entry, excess entry, right? Everybody thinks it's a side entry. It also happens in science. Academic inventions are made by 2, 3 teams around the simultaneous time, right? And some of you are necessity entrepreneurs because you lack the resources or you lose your job and you get into entrepreneurship. And the last option is you get in because you want independence, you want to do good, and you have mixed motives, like our other panelists will talk about, having mixed motives, right? So let me provide a definition of entrepreneurship which our side will take forward. If you're an entrepreneur, you are doing something new, and I put new in quotes. It can be as new as you would like or somewhat new. But the important thing is you are doing something new which is uncertain, your payoffs are uncertain, and you are doing it for the private good. You have an intention of doing well yourself. That's the operating definition I will run with. And when you overlay the society, Aral's argument about the societal impact, you get this distinction where you can see some entrepreneurs who do well themselves cause societal loss, and this is destructive entrepreneurs, and societal gain is productive entrepreneurs. In a theoretical definition, for us, the entire set is entrepreneurs. Our distinction, though, is, let me give you an example of a destructive entrepreneur, Bernie Madoff, who stole people's money using a pyramid scheme, and this is Edison, who changed the way we communicate and push things through. Right? So the central question for us now is, are we in the phase of destructive entrepreneurship, or are we in the phase of productive entrepreneurship? And that's what we would like to answer, right? I thank Aral for setting up the stage about the problems destructive entrepreneurs can cause, but is it the mean, is it the median, is it the society's return, right? And thank you again for our editor for raising this about FANGs and the term of FANGs. The central argument is if you measure society's wealth in the x-axis in value, right, in dollar terms, and y-axis in some type of happiness coefficient, the FANGs are both destroying value and also destroying our happiness, farming us, like the matrix sense. Essentially, the unhappiness it causes us makes away the 3.3 in valuation or the wealth they create or the future earnings they have, right? So to put the 3.3 trillion in context, it's 11 times Singapore's economy. So they've all started. Bezos started in his garage. They've all started like you and I will, right, in the garage. They started as entrepreneurs. They were given rules of the game. They were told they could do things. They were told you couldn't do things. They did what was legal. They took your data. They said it was legal to do. You had a right to come in. You had a right to say no, right? It's legal. If you want to change that, there are 2 reasons you could change this, in my opinion. And the 2 reasons are, first, if they prevent future gales of creative innovation that will change the world. If Aral's innovation is the next future thing and the FANGs stop this coming forward, society is worse off. Then we need to interfere. Governments need to interfere. The second way you can change this is by voting with your feet. You don't like it? Vote. Walk away. Right? Create opportunities. Support alternatives. Go to my friend Aral. Let the gales of creative destruction be unleashed. And I would like to sign up for his browser as well. Yes? As soon as it's up. And then this vehement criticism of venture capital, right? Venture capital is this, venture capital is that, I mean, you check any empirical evidence for $1 invested by a venture capitalist, return to society. We are not talking about private return to the venture capitalist or private return to the limited partners who invest, is $3.33. The next best are businesses do this in R&D. They do it only, they get a much lower return. Venture capitalists actually drive economic societal welfare because they increase absorptive capacity. Even the firms that fail leave technologies. And the individuals who failed firms also then go back to being entrepreneurs. Let me be mindful of time, and I need to skip a few slides to keep our 10-minute rule. Yes, we would like all our fangs to be here, right? Doing good for society and here, right? But that's not the case to break them up if they are operating legally. Right? So some solutions I've heard is small, set up things. Small is never an answer if you want to understand big and complex problems. The example is medical technology. Small studies always get results that go either ways. Only large sample studies and over a period of time have given us insights. Small also means you'll have interoperative costs. You will also have economies of, you can never achieve economies of scale, which you can then pass on to your customers. Small is okay choice for some people who want to be small. But for society to create value, small is not the choice. Right? And then I would say again, to reiterate the point, the way to take society forward is new entrepreneurship. Government should interfere if monopolistic powers are preventing new entrepreneurs from coming in. Or you dislike this, vote with your feet, don't use them. I'll skip this slide as well. In the strategy group, we like Q 2x2s, right? I'll leave it for a second and skip this slide. And I want to leave you with the examples of entrepreneurship from the classes I teach. This year, I had the privilege of working with 25 teams, 16 teams in the undergraduate level, 9 teams in the master's level. All 25 teams are earnest, sustainable entrepreneurs. I just picked one team. I could have picked many teams with sustainable intentions. This is Karen and Mervyn. They are trying to overhaul the cardboard distribution business. Cardboards cost $2. But they want to overhaul this, right? And they're looking at semiconductor industry, which ships fabs in. Somebody takes the fabs, gets on a plane, and goes and hand delivers them because they get broken otherwise. So they want to do this using sustainable mycelium. Mycelium is fungi, not something that grows on agricultural waste, right? And they're trying to disrupt this industry by sustainable attempts. And finally, I leave this last slide with you. And the last slide being that entrepreneurs do more good, governments can intervene, only if they block creative gales of destruction. If customers don't like it, they can vote with their feet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And now the next speaker for the proposition is Sumitra. She's a country director for Ashoka, the NGO. And she's also the founder of Playum, a social enterprise that uses play to spark creativity. And I think on the chart below, you see the votes. I don't really see them shifting very much. Let's see if there's a change after Sumitra speaks. Over to you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. How's everyone feeling? What's the vote looking like at the moment? Do we have an can we have an upgraded view? Or should we?
Yeah.
Oh, it hasn't shifted. Okay.
No, it hasn't.
All right.
Slightly.
Yeah. All right. So I'm here to argue that entrepreneurs do harm today. And I really like to focus on the term today. Because before I start, I'd really love us to really take a step back and look at where we are at the moment. We are...
The counter can start.
I'm getting extra time. It's okay. We are in a very, very, very different time in history. If you look at the chart over the last 500 years, innovation is just leapfrogging at exponential pace. We are very much on the vertical side on this slide. That is creating significant shifts in our society. It's doing it in 3 ways. One is, as I said, we are in breakneck speed and creating a lot of change. 2 is the actual dynamics and how we organize ourselves in society, in organizations, are changing. We're no longer hierarchical in hierarchical structures. Organizations don't operate in that way anymore. One person tells, many people do. And it trickles down and it trickles upwards. By then, your business idea is over, or it's created a lot of harm. We're now flatter, we're moving, we're bumping up against each other. We're no longer organized in the boundaries of your office, in your boundaries of your organization, in the boundaries of your nation. We are moving fluidly in society across the world. So the very dynamism of organizations are changing, and people and society is changing. And the third thing I'd like to talk about in this rapidly changing world, and I spend a lot of my time in Indonesia, you know, the 4th largest country in the world, 50 million young people, one of the world's largest social media market. And it's a world where everyone is a creator. Everyone has an influence. It's not just the Straits Times, my friends. It is everyone. And therefore, I want to come back to the role of the influencer and the role of media to do more good, as you are today, in society. So the focus of my conversation today is how do we redefine entrepreneurship so that we balance the harm that is accidentally created or intentionally created, and unleash and redefine entrepreneurship. And that's what I do. So I belong to a global organization called Ashoka. Ashoka is in 75 different countries, founded about 37 years ago, based out of DC, with the fundamental belief that individuals can drive change in society through entrepreneurial approaches for solutions. We're a network of over 3,500 social entrepreneurs, which we call the Ashoka Fellows, including a couple of Nobel Prize winners, and an extended network of phenomenal change makers that is raising our consciousness and awakening to new ways and new innovative ways for change. And how do these amazing young entrepreneurs do it? They're realigning incentives to get society unstuck, right? They're not following business as usual. This proposition looks at today, the business models as we know it today, which is extrapolated from the last 50 to 100 years. But we're on a different age. We're in a different part of the curve. Therefore, we need to look at realigned incentives. Otherwise, we do more harm. We need new models. We need models that build systems and change mindsets and encourage participation of all. And that might be small, and that might be big. But it's systemic, and it drives behavioral change. And we need new fields of change. So I'm loving cyborg, but we need new fields to change the status quo. And how do these individuals do it? And here's where the tension is with traditional businesses. 94% of social entrepreneurs have their business model replicated. That means they give away their models so that others learn and proliferate the good for all, for the common good of all. And I started my career in the business sector, and if you Google, I do have a couple of patents. The very nature of patents is to control intellectual property and extract rent from patents. But how about our wonderful social entrepreneurs who are saying, let's do things differently. Let's give it away for free, right? And many of us social entrepreneurs, through their models of innovation, are actually affecting national policy for the good of all. So again, businesses do harm when they're not considering the good for all. And many of them also create, and the other statistics talk to how we shift national patents. So just to make this come alive a little bit, again, many of you know the Wikipedia and Jimmy Wales, who really looked at information very, very differently. Information is a core right to every individual, but also the other side of that is he also looked at how each one of us could generate information, how each one of us could support each other through a peer-to-peer network of self-regulation and generation of information, and trusting a system and an open platform to provide information for the good of all. This is very different from many other models that appropriate information in a limited way. More closer to home, many of you may know Beyond Low with Edible Garden City, who's really looking at the entire food cycle and bringing urban farming into the homes of every Singaporean and further afield now, and looking at the full contribution of food in a food-scarce nation or land-scarce nation, how that looks like in the entire food chain. And I really like the work Sazad is doing around foreign workers. Now, instead of just raising activism around the nature of foreign workers, foreign construction workers in Singapore, he's going one step further. He's considering voice and agency. How does he unleash the voice and agency of Bangladeshi foreign workers in a way that they are empowered and the identity shifted so they can go in a nation where the spoken word is incredibly important, to actually go to a doctor or ask the person next door for help or support, or even go back home when they do, to build partnerships with other institutions and create better livelihoods. So changing the trajectory of a foreign construction worker in Singapore. Again, purpose over profit. And last but not least is a more recent technology entrepreneur in Indonesia that's also using blockchain and data in the agricultural sector to liberalize the sector for the good of all. So where I'd like to come back to is really 3 Ps that need to be balanced when we consider harm or good for entrepreneurship. One is purpose. We need to bring purpose to the core of what we do entrepreneurially. And when we don't, that's when we create more harm. And when we create more harm, when we force fit enterprise-based thinking into organizations and institutions that are doing more good. So hence, we are both nonprofit organizations. The second thing is people. And we're in a learning institution, and I'm grateful for that opportunity, is really looking at how we unleash voice and agency and trust in people in this fast-moving, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And I really wanted to hold on to that for a minute because we're in a university ground. There's fantastic ways of doing that. We know that 80% of social entrepreneurs started something new in their teens. So my call out to the young people in this room is you have the opportunity to do more good by starting something small. And that's when you can create more good to counteract the harm that is accelerating and spinning out of that fast-moving future. And you can exercise your voice and agency through the products you buy and through your engagement as employees in companies. And last but not least is policy. How do you get to a place in policy making where you're unleashing resource and capital towards supporting more good organizations? And it is critical that we build a world of more good to counteract the harm that my colleague has just outlined in the previous slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sumitra. Now let's take a look. Oh, there's a discernible bump up in those of you who agree with the motion now. Anybody else wants to continue voting, please do so. And now I would like to call on Professor Timothy Clark, the second speaker opposing the motion. And I just want to remind Timothy that you're from SMU, you have home ground advantage, and you have to work doubly hard to make up for those numbers.
Well, well, morning everyone. I've only been at SMU a week. So is that home ground? I don't know.
Welcome to Singapore.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here and to share in today's event to end my first week at SMU. And what I wanted to do was kind of shift our focus away perhaps from FANGs and digital, my time needs to start, FANGs and digital, to an area where perhaps you haven't thought of it as entrepreneurial. Now, there's been a huge structural shift in advanced economies over the last 40 years. Essentially, they've shifted from industrially based economies to service-based economies. And the key industries that have developed in that period are what we call knowledge-intensive firms, okay? They are basically the banks, the financial sector, the business advice sector, the creative industries. These are where a lot of economies are basing their economic good and their economic development going forward. And this is where the jobs of the future are coming. And what I want to demonstrate by focusing on the business advice industry in the next 9 minutes or so is to illustrate to you that these sectors are fundamentally based upon knowledge entrepreneurship. And I want to illustrate that argument, as I said, by looking at business advice industry. So, I'm going to build on Reddy's definition of entrepreneurship. And what I want to focus on is that fundamentally, entrepreneurship is about creating innovation, about creating new opportunities, seeing opportunities that perhaps weren't there before, understanding markets and understanding segments in a way that perhaps hasn't been understood before. But fundamentally, the process of entrepreneurship is uncertain. Nobody knows who is going to be successful. And I've been telling people when I've been preparing this talk that if you think about the film industry and you think about going to see a film this weekend, there's probably 40 or 50 films that have been released this week, but only about 10 will actually make it to the cinema. The fact is that nobody knows which film is going to be successful. Nobody knows what book is going to be successful. And similarly, in the business ideas industry, nobody really knows what ideas are going to be successful. And so what you have is a huge amount of generation of ideas and a lot of things coming to the market without necessarily knowing what is going to be successful. So that entrepreneurial process, that generation of ideas, is absolutely critical in terms of this hyper-competitivity that is exhibited in these industries. The hyper-competitivity comes from the fact that because nobody knows what's going to be successful, you have to produce a lot of candidates, ideas, films, books that may be successful without knowing which one is going to be successful. Nobody knew that Harry Potter would be successful. It has been, as you know, hugely successful. The other point I want to make is that if you think again about films, films have about 2 weeks to be successful because they have a marketing period before they're released, then they're released, and essentially from a Friday through to a Sunday, that determines whether a film catches and becomes successful and develops word of mouth. And so these innovations have a very short time period in which to be successful. A key concept within management is sustainable competitive advantage. We ask the question, why is it that some firms are more successful than others? Why is it that some firms last longer than others, have a longer life cycle than others? The answer is around the kind of unique assets, the capabilities, and the resources that these organizations have. The problem is that nobody knows what combination of assets, resources, and capabilities actually leads to success. There aren't replicable formulas. And so what the business advice industry fundamentally does is to produce potential formulas for success that organizations can then implement. This is what management consultancies do. This is what management gurus do. They essentially try and identify potential ideas and ways of organizing and managing companies so that they can be more successful. So what you have is essentially a knowledge production system. You have a knowledge entrepreneurship business advice industry. And it's comprised of, as I said, the management consultants, business schools through their executive development, through professors like Reddy and others, developing ideas, projecting those ideas to managers, writing articles, publishing books, making television programs, videos, and so forth, and trying to catch the attention of managers so that managers start to implement these ideas. The critical thing is there are lots of ideas being produced in the green sphere, being disseminated through the orange sphere into the blue sphere. The blue sphere has an awful lot of choice. The critical issue is what ideas catch. Now, here's some management gurus. These are people you may not have heard of, but these are people who have developed ideas that themselves have become multi-billion-pound sectors, okay? So Tom Peters in the 1980s developed something called excellence, and he wrote a book called In Search of Excellence, which to this day remains the best-selling management book of all time, okay? Rosebeth Moss-Kanter is a professor at Harvard Business School. She has written about change, and her ideas have had a huge influence in terms of how organizations are run. Peter Senge developed the concept of the learning organization. Again, had a huge influence in terms of how organizations are run, but in turn has had a huge influence in terms of the kinds of services that the management consultancies offer. So the large management consultancies have developed excellence packages, change management packages, learning organization packages. These have had a massive impact in terms of how organizations have organized themselves. And all of this has come out of the process of knowledge entrepreneurship. Fundamentally, these organizations and these individuals are knowledge entrepreneurs par excellence. If they weren't, they would fail. Their raison d'etre is to develop new ideas, innovative ideas, and project those to their client organizations and to try and improve the competitiveness of their clients. I said earlier that hyper-competition means that these ideas have a short life cycle. And the life cycle looks something like this, in that most ideas have a kind of accelerated growth phase, they peak and they decline. But what's interesting is that if you look, and this is a study that looked at ideas over a 40-year period, what's interesting is that you can see that the curves of the ideas in the 1950s, they go on for a long time. And the curves of the ideas in the 1980s, they're much shorter. So the fact is that the life cycles have decreased over time, which has meant that the hyper-competition has increased and the intensity of competition has increased even further. But also, look how popular ideas are. So if you get a good idea, it gets implemented in an awful lot of organizations in the 1980s, whereas in the 1950s, they were less popular. Fewer organizations implemented them. So you've got this dynamic that when an idea catches, it gets implemented by a lot of organizations, but it only catches for a short period of time. And so you have to have a constant innovation process, constant knowledge, entrepreneurship. This is a specific fashion called quality circles, became very popular in the 1980s. You can see it didn't last for very long, about 3 years. This has possibly been the most popular fashion of the last 20, 25 years, business process reengineering. Again, it was popular probably for about 2.5 or so years. So I want to end by saying that, if you actually look at where graduates from universities go, the vast majority of graduates from this university go into the knowledge-intensive sectors that I've talked about. They go into finance, they go into business advice, they go into creative industries, they go into retail. And so we as a university have a responsibility to produce graduates that are not simply future ready, but ready to work in particular kinds of environments and particular kinds of industries. And so we as a university are looking to prepare students through our graduate learning outcomes, which are displayed here, to prosper and succeed in these industries. We need to create people who are innovative, creative, they're agile, and they have a sense of novelty. My final slide is, well, I was going to also emphasize, but the President very kindly did this for me, that I think we have an enviable record in terms of generating entrepreneurs. And here's 2 examples up here of recent organizations that have been set up by our students. My final slide, I just want to leave you with an image of the future. And the future of this university is around innovation, is around entrepreneurship, and is exemplified by the bridge from this building into the new building that the President referred to. That, as I said, we see the future as creating knowledge entrepreneurs and people who can prosper in this new economic environment.
Thank you. And let's take a look at the numbers again. Okay, those of you who agree that entrepreneurs do more harm than good, the number is inching up to nearly 38%. Those who disagree, 61, 62. So we have seen some shift in the numbers. Before I go on to the next phase of the debate, where we would have younger people who are often the entrepreneurs and people who consume the product that entrepreneurs produce, they will come on stage and give us their argument. But I just wanted to, I've been tasked to sum up this debate. I should just add a disclaimer. I'm more of a print reporter. We usually get at least a couple of hours to think and refine our words and all that. But you just heard my boss Warren, so I'm now supposed to do all this kind of stuff live. So and we can only do our best. Okay, so from Aral, we hear his argument about warning about the dangers of surveillance capitalism. He coined that lovely phrase, people farming. I mean, lovely as in very apt phrase, people farming, to describe the current business model. And his solution to the ills of entrepreneurship as practiced today is to think small, especially in terms of technology. From Reddy, his main thesis is that entrepreneurs do good. There's no problem with the current business model. There is some issues around destructive entrepreneurship, but overall he produced many slides to show us that actually entrepreneurs today, even the FANGs and the startups, actually create good total societal value. And I don't know how he knew that Ara was going to talk about small is better, but he had a very quick rejoinder that small is better is a fallacy for the reasons that he outlined. And his solution to the problems of the ills of entrepreneurship today is more entrepreneurs. From Sumitra, she continues with Aral's argument that the business model today is broken, and she tries to argue that what we need is a shift in mindsets. For example, we need more social entrepreneurs, people who can come up with, redefine the purpose of organization, and how we can empower individuals who can then create networks of change. From Timothy, he's maintaining the idea that entrepreneurship is good, entrepreneurs are good. He then broadens the definition of what entrepreneurs is to include knowledge entrepreneurs. And he's actually shared with us, I think, the fruits of decades of his research, where he looks at how management ideas have spread over the years across the world, from conception to universities, business schools, to management boardrooms, and in the end to businesses and society. And his main argument is that knowledge entrepreneurs, in the sense of people who come up with all these very impactful ideas, have tremendous, meaningful, and presumably positive impact on business and society. That's just summing up their main argument. Okay, and now it's my pleasure to invite on stage the students who will be arguing for the motion. Can I invite Stacy and Eleora up on stage? Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, very good. Okay, so I'm reminded that we should look at the percentage of, all right, distinct closing in of the gap. All right. Yeah, so it's 44.7 and 55.3%. So we could have a very narrow win or tie. We'll see how the students move your minds and your votes. Yes, Stacy? No, hang on, sorry. I'm so sorry. Wait, so for the motion, speaking for the motion, Eleora Joseph from National Junior College. Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. Yes, the first speaker is Stacy Lee from Catholic Junior College.
So how many of you will willingly disclose your personal information? But how many of you willingly surrender your personal information when signing up for social media platforms, online shopping portals, or maybe even enabling your location devices when you're at home? Today, I am not going to approach this motion with the assumption that modern-day entrepreneurs intentionally cause harm. Instead, I'm going to focus on the harms that inevitably arises from the dynamics of modern-day entrepreneurships and share with you why it's felt disproportionately by youths who are in a relatively more vulnerable position as compared to the rest of the demographic. You see, being born into the world of technology, the youth of today may be more predisposed to viewing information spread on new media as credible, or to regard its credibility as the normative. This is problematic because this implicit trust dulls the critical faculties of youth users, allowing misinformation to take root more easily and to be more difficult to uproot. To paint a clearer picture, I would like to invite you to picture the following scenario with me. See, imagine scrolling through your Instagram feed and coming across a picture of an oil spill. The caption reads, "Do you know the world's 15 largest ships emit more pollutants than all of the world's cars combined?" Now, how many of you would believe this caption? Well, guess what? I did not make that up. In 2009, this article was published on The Guardian for the purpose of a thought experiment at the height of production of large ships. However, this claim was not about what was happening at that time, but what would happen in theory under certain circumstances. Its calculations also focused only on a particular pollutant, sulfur, and held the assumption that these 15 ships used the absolute worst fuel allowed in regulations versus all the world's 50 million cars in 2009 using the cleanest possible gasoline. But you see, various media publications took this hypothetical scenario and ran it as if it was reality, and readers on the receiving end believed it as such. Why is this important? Recognize that much of modern-day entrepreneurship may operate with this similar pattern of information spreading, using sound bites and catchy headlines to arrest our attention. So just like how easily the pollution comparison was misunderstood, this suggests how we tend to take things at face value rather than with a critical eye. In January this year, a popular game, Town of Salem, suffered a data breach exposing 7.6 million user details, including that of email addresses, passwords, IP addresses, and even game and forum activities. You see, the fact that 7.6 million game users, most of which being youths, were affected, attests to how much youth suffer disproportionately from the effects of data leakages as opposed to other demographics, as seen from how the Sing Health breach last year affected only 1.6 million patients, which is significantly lesser than 7.6 million. You see, this relates to the larger picture of how consumers today remain naive of how much information we are giving away and are not actively scrutinizing it. Hence, until we are willing to relinquish certain expectations of technology, we will continue to be willing participants at the end of this harm. This then brings me to my second argument for today, that in this digital world, we trade privacy for convenience. See, imagine being watched 24/7, having your every click on the web registered and stored as data. Now imagine being tracked, having your whereabouts made known, every store you walk into, the frequency of your visits. Now, if you're not thrown off by that example, consider how all this information of your private human experience is being sold to companies without your consent. Because this is the reality of surveillance capitalism in modern-day entrepreneurship. In February this year, it was revealed that Apple's FaceTime software allowed a user's microphone to be turned on without their knowledge or permission. But from February till today, I'm sure many of you have still used FaceTime or other video calling applications that similarly require the access to your phone's microphone. Now, what this shows is that for the sake of convenience, consumers knowingly let their guard down, and modern-day entrepreneurs are aware of this too, as they increasingly market convenience to the modern-day consumer. In the past, we used to search Google for answers because it is convenient. But today, Google searches us, and we are the victims of this exploitation of behavioral predictions. Hence, given the situation at hand, the impacts of modern-day entrepreneurship for now are indeed more harm than good. And moving forward, we need to wisen up and talk to each other, between various industry stakeholders, consumers, entrepreneurs, and ask each other, at the end of the day, what kind of digital world we want to create and live in. For all these reasons, I'm very proud to propose.
Thank you. Thank you, Stacey. And we see the numbers continuing to shift upwards for those of you who agree with the proposition. And now may I invite Eleora Joseph from National Junior College to make her arguments.
Thank you, Ms. Chua. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to visualize the modern entrepreneur I'm sure that for many of you, perhaps the image of Mark Zuckerberg may have popped up. Young, successful, and the man behind Facebook, one of the largest tech companies in the world. Or maybe you might have thought of the typical entrepreneur success story, where a dejected employee starts to pursue a brilliant business venture that he or she may have had in mind and makes it big afterwards. Sure, these are examples of entrepreneurs that have defined this generation. With the advent of the internet, more technological entrepreneurs have stepped up, creating the social media platforms, search engines, and other web applications that are now a part of our daily lives. However, we think that these entrepreneurs have also caused unintentional harms as a result of the platforms and sites that they have established. We also recognize that, yes, entrepreneurs have made some positive contributions to our society. They create business, they contribute to the economy, and they create jobs. Although, frankly speaking, none of these are probably truly mutually exclusive to entrepreneurs, since we need to recognize that traditional companies also do contribute significantly to the economy, and we do think that constant innovation and progress have already led to the creation of new jobs. We think that at the very best, these benefits of entrepreneurship might not be entirely exclusive and might be negligible, but at the very worst, we think that the harms have far outweighed their benefits, as we have already mentioned earlier. We've already talked to you about the breach of personal data that occurs by modern-day entrepreneurs. Since these companies are profit-driven, they will often prioritize their own revenue over more important things like their customers' privacy. These have hence led to them selling customers' information to advertising companies in exchange for profit, or monitoring users' online activity and selling these information that they have harvested. Unfortunately, these are done without users' consent, meaning that people don't often have the autonomy as to who has access to their information. But what makes this even worse is that inevitably, this occurs to all of us. In a world which is increasingly reliant on technology, I'm sure that all of us have had to use the internet at some point or another, be it to complete an assignment, type an email, or even to sign up for today's event. All these activities leave a trail of data on the internet, a data footprint, which can be easily picked up by these technological companies and be even more easily sold to others. This large problem is a direct result of the modern-day entrepreneurship, because the business model created by them unfortunately encouraged these harmful business practices. But what can we do about it? Because at the end of the day, it isn't the nature of entrepreneurship that has created these harms per se, but rather the approach that our modern-day entrepreneurs have adopted. Entrepreneurship certainly can bring benefits to society, and it's simply a matter of pursuing entrepreneurship in a more sustainable manner that can have better outreach and possibly have a greater and more positive effect on our community. And what better group to step up and redefine what entrepreneurship today means than the very own youth in our society? I think that it's very apt that I'm standing here today giving you this speech in none other than SMU. Because SMU is an institution that cares very deeply about increasing the efforts to nurture entrepreneurs and to inculcate the entrepreneurial mindset in its students. Because entrepreneurship doesn't just have to be about creating the next big social media site. Entrepreneurship is about recognizing one's power to impact the world and having the courage to plant the seeds of one's idea and let it blossom. There are many organizations today that help to nurture budding entrepreneurs, and we see many young people in our society that have already begun to embark on ideas that are starting to change our traditional mindset of the tech-based entrepreneurship that we're so used to hearing about. Take, for instance, Maika Hilpeet. She's younger than me, but is already an award-winning social entrepreneur as the founder and director of Ayana International, a non-profit organization created to empower the youth in less developed nations by magnifying the power of youth innovation in such communities. And yes, this might be the case of one in millions, but it's not about us youths not being able to make this change. It's about us getting the relevant resources and opportunities to develop these ideas that we might have, and hence be able to also translate them into tangible change. Because while we might simply be the youth of today, we will also grow up to be the leaders of tomorrow. So don't let the harmful models of the entrepreneurs of today sour your mindset towards what the entrepreneurs of tomorrow can do. Because we think that when harnessed properly, entrepreneurship is something that can be turned into a force of good. Because ultimately, our future lies in our own hands, and it's only us who have the power to change it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was perfectly timed, and another shift in the numbers. So I think Stacey and Eleora were quite persuasive. They managed to bump up the numbers. It's now 45.5% who agree, and 55% who disagree. Okay, and now we have a pair of student alumni who will be opposing the motion. Can I invite Chong Kok Leong, Ngee Ann Polytechnic, an alumnus of Ngee Ann Polytechnic, who's now a full-time national serviceman.
Good morning. Today I stand against the motion and make the case that entrepreneurs today do more good than harm. So I got a chance to do an internship in Sydney with a fintech company called Society One under Ngee Ann Polytechnic's entrepreneurship office, The Sandbox. And that experience has greatly contributed to why I take this position today. So please allow me to share. In today's day and age, technology is constantly pushing the envelope. Startups and entrepreneurships are synonymous with innovation. And innovation is only made possible through the use of this technology. So technology can come in many forms, but they're always constantly pushing the envelope and improving things like work productivity and efficiency. So through these purposes and methods, they have allowed businesses to really succeed and grow, and our economy to develop, and exponentially even. But I make the case today that it is not only businesses that stand to gain from the innovation that entrepreneurship encourages. Even consumers like you and I are also able to reap benefits. One of the main ways that consumers stand to benefit is through having access to better goods and services, either through being able to get new product offerings from innovative startups or improvements on existing ones, those startups that aim to be the cockroaches of an industry as opposed to the unicorns. They aim to survive, to do things better, faster, and cheaper. So consumers can benefit because this increased competition really drives the competitiveness between businesses and forces them to compete for the consumer's money, for my wallet and for your wallet. So this increased competition really benefits consumers because now companies have to fight harder with one another to provide the best goods and services possible and still maintain attractive prices in order to keep the business of the customers, such as myself and yourself. So a familiar example would be the time in the taxi industry when Grab and Uber first debuted in Singapore. So in the past, we used to have to try to flag one taxi down on the street or call a hotline to book one. Nowadays, we do it really simply, and it has really improved by having only to book one through a smartphone app. So this increased competition and innovation or disruption has really changed things and improved sort of the quality of life, at least in one small aspect, in how we book and hail rides today. And not only that, consumers also benefited from the low and attractive prices that were given initially when they were fighting for market share. And even till today, because there are many players in the industry, an increased availability of services, increased choice, which forces them to remain competitive and constantly push the envelope to offer better services. So although a business ultimate goal is to turn a profit, it doesn't always have to come at the expense of the consumer. Many businesses can and do add value to consumers' lives while they make money. And I would like to share an example that I've seen. So the startup that I worked for, Society One, is an online peer-to-peer money lending company. So what they do is that they raise money from investors to provide personal loans out to consumers. So as they are a purely online platform, they are able to save and reduce overhead costs, such as not having to have a physical location. And they can pass on these cost savings to their consumers and their investors. And how they do that is by being able to offer a lower interest rate and a higher return rate to their investors as compared to a traditional bank. So they are able to do good, not only that one small aspect, but customers are also able to save money when they were able to take the loan because they could refinance their high interest debt, such as credit card loans and payday loans, and even sometimes reduce from double-digit interest rates to just single-digit or even half their interest expense. So not only were they able to save money, the company got to make money. And the clients also got to save time and effort as they now only had to keep track of one bill due on one day of the month as opposed to having to pay attention to 5, 6, 7 bills due to multiple agencies over different periods of time. So that is just one example that I've come across. Now, we all know that not all businesses are created equal. And there are often businesses that are not as ethical or not as invested in doing good. That is true. And one example cannot possibly represent the entire industry. But entrepreneurship is just like a tool of great utility. It has brought us many gifts, such as economic growth and better products and services, as I've mentioned. And in the wrong hands and misused, it can also cause a lot of harm and damage, as some of the opposition has shown. But I believe that because it is like a tool, even consumers like you and I, fortunately, can shape the entrepreneurship landscape to try and encourage good behavior from companies by choosing to support ethical and responsible businesses and choosing to avoid unscrupulous businesses that practice bad practices. And as Professor already mentioned, we can vote with our feet, vote with our wallets, to choose and patronize good businesses and support ethical and responsible practices. And hopefully through that way, we can promote companies to be better, more responsible, more ethical, and increase the good that comes from entrepreneurship and reduce the harms that can potentially come out of it. And with that, I restate my stand against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Kok Leong. And now wrapping up the case for the opposition and also the entire debate, Anna Hautanto, who's a SMU's alumnus and also CEO of the New Savvy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today with us. This is a topic that is very close to my heart because I thought about the topic a lot, and I think there are a few keywords here that we look at: entrepreneurs today and harm, and what is harm and good. But before that, we have heard all the arguments for and against, but I want to bring all of you back to the heart and to my experiences as a founder. So I started a startup called the New Savvy. We are Asia's leading financial investments and career platform for women in Asia. What we do is we deliver high quality content through media, conferences, and women-only e-learning platform. When I started it, all I wanted to do was to simplify financial concepts. And now our vision is to empower 100 million women to achieve financial happiness. We are in 5 countries: Singapore, Hong Kong, India, Philippines, and Vietnam. The thing is, I've never really wanted to be an entrepreneur. All I wanted to do was to get a good job and a very decent pay. My family, I am half Indonesian, so my family came from Indonesia. We had a small business, and we were hit very badly by the financial crisis. So I grew up struggling financially, and I see firsthand the difficulties it has of starting a business and maintaining it. So my mom even had to take a credit card debt, and when I was 21 years old, I was in SMU, and I was very, very worried that we don't have a place to stay because rent was going up. So I started in finance, and I studied finance, and I spent 10 years there, and I was very, very happy there. But one of the things that I realized was the fact that financial education is lacking in Singapore, in Asia, and worldwide. And I'm sure some of you are students, and most of you are parents. I asked myself, isn't it crazy how we are always taught to be good in everything, in math, sciences, languages, and for the kids today, technology, but nobody teaches us how to be good with money. Nobody teaches us how to have healthy financial habits. So I asked myself, what is the most underserved market, and how can I help people? I started my company, and it has been 4 years. It's been a rough journey, and even after 1 year, I was still struggling because a lot of people actually told me that I was being stupid, I was being naive. But one year later, I was giving a talk to 100 people. And after the talk, a 17-year-old lady came up to me and said, my father is retrenched and my mom is hospitalized. I read the New Savvy and it has helped me a lot. So thank you for starting that. And when she said that, I actually cried in front of her. I think the point that I want to make is, and the point that I have been a bit uncomfortable from all this, from the opposition, is the fact that they define entrepreneurs as only the big companies who are out to steal your data. But I actually Googled what is an entrepreneur, and it says that it's a person who sets up a business or businesses taking on financial risks. As people who start businesses, all of you know that the risks are terribly not in your favor, okay? More than 90% of companies fail within the first 2 years. In fact, if you read a lot of research, there's founders' depression, suicidal thoughts, mental health issues. But why do we do it? We do it because we believe in a cause that is bigger than us. We believe in the mission. We believe in the greater good that is bigger than myself and the profits that we can make. Because honestly, if you really want to make money, go and work in a bank. Don't start a company. So I think if entrepreneurs are successful, what we can do is we can encourage productivity and innovation. We can also create jobs, increase talent and wealth creation. And lastly, the other side keep talking about how bad these companies are, but do they not mention there are corporate social responsibility programs to help marginalized and underprivileged people? I think, as an entrepreneur, and I think let's define entrepreneurs as somebody who has started a business, somebody, whether it's both big and small. It can be social entrepreneurs from Asuka. It can be a cyber rights activist from the other party. It can be your hawker centers. These are businesses, and do they create more harm than good? I don't think so. I think that we, as entrepreneurs, at the heart of it, we create more good than harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for that very interesting presentation. Now let's take a look at the numbers. It's now 42% who agree that entrepreneurs do more harm than good. Do please continue to press your button and vote. I think there was an earlier slide that compared the figures to what they were in the beginning, so there has been a clear upward bump in those who agree with the motion. Okay. I'm supposed to sum up, but I don't really think there's a need to. Right, okay. So I will just use I can, but I think it's quite boring. I just want to use my prerogative as the moderator to just ask the first question, which is basically picking up from Anna's question, which has been bugging me throughout most of the morning, which is that, there's so much talk about entrepreneurs in terms of, the big tech companies and the startups, or, like the white men in Silicon Valley kind of setup, as Ara would put it. But, how about entrepreneurs across the board? I just wonder whether any of the speakers want to weigh in on this. If you extend the lens, broaden the lens to look at entrepreneurs across different fields, can you really say that they do more harm than good? Okay, anyone?
Can I take
Yes.
that? So I think that touches upon something very important that we haven't talked about at all, oddly enough, which is where is the investment going? Right? Because these businesses, as entrepreneurs, we need investment, right? We need to fund it somehow. Where is that coming from, and what sort of businesses is it going to? And if we look at the environment today, and the motion is entrepreneurs today, if we look at that, the investment is going, 99.999% of this investment is going into the mainstream model, which is venture capital. Venture capital is funding certain types of businesses. Remember that venture capital doesn't invest in a sustainable business. It invests in the exit, in the sale of the business. That's when the venture capitalists get their money back. So it's not about, that's why we talk about startups. We don't talk about stay-ups. Maybe that's what we should be talking about. Because I wish that money and investment was going into the kind of businesses that was mentioned in the last talk just now. Thank you for that, by the way, that impassioned speech. I wish it was going to the hawker stalls. That's a great kind of business. You look around Singapore and you see entrepreneurship in its best form, right? But it's not. It's going to startups, and a startup is already sold. It's either going to be bought by Google or Facebook or a company like that, or it's going to IPO, be sold to the public. So we need to really talk about where the money is going, because this comes back to Reddy. Your 2 points that you made, your main points, was one, that we can choose to walk with our feet. But what are we saying if 99% of all investment is going to these companies, and we're saying just don't use their products? Why are you investing all the money in building these services then? And then blaming the victims, right? I may choose not to use Google. What am I going to use? Facebook? Nope, same business model. Snapchat, same business model. Name all of your startups, same business model. Stop investing in these companies. Don't blame the victims. And then don't put the onus on the victims. And the other thing that you said, Reddy, was you said that it's legal, right? As long as they're legal, we should not touch them, right? We have to understand that legal does not mean ethical. Slavery was legal. I don't think anyone can argue that it was ethical.
Okay, in the interest of fairness, anybody want to respond on the opposition side? And I think, gosh, my maths is not very good. I think that was about 2.5 minutes, so you have 2.5 minutes max.
I think very, very briefly, I don't know if the microphone is working, but very briefly,
it is.
I think what Anna and I are arguing is the same thing, which is that we need to decenter our understanding of entrepreneurship, that we're focusing upon a very small number of organizations, a very small number of individuals. there are many, many millions of other entrepreneurs who are making positive contributions to society. And I think in different ways, our presentations were saying that it is absolutely fundamental, it's a fundamental process in particular industries, and those industries are carrying a huge weight in terms of the economy and the positive effects as a consequence of that.
Okay, thank you. And now it's my pleasure to open up the questions to all of you. Please introduce yourself, keep the questions sharp and short. You have 30 seconds to make your point, and then we will do, as I did just now, we'll just open up the responses to, let's say, 1 minute from each side. Keep it short and sharp. Okay, first question. Anyone? Yes, a gentleman in green over there.
Hi. Good morning, distinguished speakers. I'm Dixon from Hwa Chong, and I was especially taken to Professor Reddy Kotha's argument and his historical analysis that when small-scale entrepreneurships are constrained, there is a lack of development and a dearth of ideas, as demonstrated by history. However, I think that right now the problem is that corporations are getting too large. They are becoming large and powerful like states, and they may in fact become stifling for new entrepreneurs and new startups. And in addition, the problem with corporations, as I see it right now, is that there's a lack of check and balance. For example, the decisions mostly rest with one person. They have the voting power, they have the majority, and there are no laws or procedures or transparency to justify legitimacy for whatever decisions that they make. And in addition, my analysis of Professor Kotha's argument, it's premised on the fact that we have the ability to walk away from we have the freedom of choice to walk away from certain companies that we don't like. However, I have 3 points to respond to that. Firstly, is there a turning point at which that all consumers are locked into these gigantic corporations and they don't have the freedom to move away? For example, social expectations play a huge role in this, right? For example, all my colleagues, my classmates, they are using Instagram. Am I obligated to use Instagram as well? Therefore, are my 2 feet really free? And in addition, a lot of information right now, consumers are not conscious of it. For example, the FaceTime microphone thing, I didn't even know about it, right? So, but I'm still a consumer, I still use FaceTime. So this information are not available. They are very subtle things. And then we don't have the information to make a decision, to make a vote. And lastly, companies, they have algorithms. They understand your behavior. They can manipulate you. They do things. They give you content that you may like, and therefore lock you into this system. So it appears to me that consumers, in fact, have their 2 feet tied to a puppeteer's strings and are not truly free to walk away from certain companies and make their own decisions. I would appreciate all responses from any speakers. Thank you.
Very interesting point. Ready?
So,
may I just say, however long you speak, I will give to the other side, okay? In the interest of fairness. So. No, it was a question addressed to you, so yeah, please. Yeah.
The question is addressed to me, so I'll go first.
Yes.
But if you saw the poll before we started, I think we should have rested our case and we would have been stronger, right? So I'm willing to rest my case again, but let me, in the interest of debate, make the argument. Thank you for the questions. They were really insightful. Essentially, our central point in any business school and in any economic society is monopolies are really bad for society. Governments have to play a role when monopolistic power comes in. It's bad for innovation, it's bad for societal welfare, it's bad for customer choice, customer surplus gets shrunk. So the question is, what defines a monopoly and where is the monopoly drawn, right? These are deeper questions and the choices we have in terms of all the breadth of options you have and how central are these for the way we live, how way we communicate, way we lead our lives. It may be in some sectors that these are large companies that we really carefully need to take a look at and then think about breaking them up into smaller pieces. I think that needs to be taken. And that's the point I reiterate. Governments should take a look at monopolistic powers because it stops further gales of creative destruction and more entrepreneurship to come in. Right? The second sorts of things is, are we socially locked in forever into these vicious cycles? Right? So yes, when new entrepreneurs create new models, not all customers understand the complete ramifications. Right? And that's where when you understand the complete ramifications, we need more activists to come and preach to us what we could do in our best interest. Right? and more new scales of entrepreneurship to come in, new ways of entrepreneurship to come in, right? So we are dependent on new entrepreneurship to come in. That's both ethical, moral, and scales of creative destruction to come in. And government should take a role in trying to break up monopolies that prevent this. Right? So we need more entrepreneurship and governments to act when it's just to be monopolistic. There are many sectors, many areas where the definition of monopoly is not very clear and it's fluid. As the provost in his speech pointed out, companies come, companies go. I take the example of Bill Gates. Microsoft was the dominant power in what we did. Microsoft unleashed enormous amounts of creativity. Having a PC in a student's life accessible, the world completely changed, having an operative system, and then this, right? But Microsoft also was monopoly. It was punished by European Council, it was punished by the US regulators, right? And as the provost mentioned, Microsoft had leading day in the sun and it's ebbing away. More entrepreneurship is important and government action is important.
Thank you for that very elegant defense. So that was 2 minutes, 29 seconds. So you guys have 2.5 minutes. Over to you.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Dixon. Very, very eloquent, spot on, and absolutely right. Under the conditions you mentioned, entrepreneurs do more harm. And therefore, I mean, the real call to action, if we operate with old business models, with old economic theories, I mean, one of the biggest challenges has been economic theories from the past that has actually been rent-seeking. And to some extent, being a business school graduate myself, I do think the sort of appropriation of knowledge and rent-seeking through knowledge, which a lot of the consultants do, is based on old business models. What we're seeing is the harm that we're articulating is the disruption that's coming about in this exponential stage, which is new ways of building business models and new ways of moving in society. And that's creating a disruption. And so, Dixon, we need you more than ever now to apply those innovative ideas, to apply those solutions to engineer purpose and good in your business models. We know that if you do something new now, you're 4 to 5 times more likely to create something good for the entire part of your life. And now, why is that important? When you're moving that fast, I do think government regulates, but often that comes too slow and too late. And it often comes when harm has already been done. I think what we'd love to see is a world where it's more self-regulating and there's more purpose in there to counteract the inadvertent harm that we heard earlier today and take action. So I would like to propose back to the idea of voice and agency, so that we're doing more purposeful good, as well as structures, economic structures, to Arul's point around venture capitalism and social finance, more innovative finance, and that's where policy comes in, to allow for more innovative finance to direct investments towards purpose. If we have policy systems that only look at all economic theories and profit gains in the short term and asset intensity and return on assets, then purpose cannot thrive under this situation. So going back to policy, I'd like to see policy support more innovative social finance towards purpose.
Oh, fantastic timing. Okay, I'm having a bit of problems keeping track of the lifetime. Can I ask, somebody from SMU to just keep track? So each response will be about 2 minutes, and then somebody just let me know when it's up. I'm finding it impossible to keep time and keep track of the conversation. All right, we'll find a way to do it. They say, okay. Okay, next question. Yes, the gentleman here.
Mine's an observation. I'm an entrepreneur. Thank you for a fine morning. I decided to come to see what's happening. An entrepreneur operating in Indonesia for 30 years. And Warren, I'm a debater as well. My call to fame is I outspoke Vivian Balakrishnan.
All right, yeah, okay.
Sometimes somebody has to. Anyway, one of the things I do is I talk to young entrepreneurs. So I want to make an observation, especially with so many young and would-be entrepreneurs here. You always begin on one side of the spectrum, the do-good spectrum. You're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to save the rhinos. You're trying to solve a community issue. there will be a shift towards the harm end. And I tell you when the shift begins. The shift begins when you start thinking of scaling. And you start thinking of scaling very quickly. The shift begins when you meet capital providers who start to dilute your values as they dilute your equity. So capital providers who flip your company, who look for 3x, who look for 25% IRR, will end up controlling you. So I say to you, entrepreneurs tend to do good. Capital providers do more harm than good. Be very careful. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I see that more as a comment than a question. Do you guys want to respond?
Yeah, I can respond as a social entrepreneur myself, and I
Okay,
run,
2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I run a social and actually it's a non-profit revenue-generating social impact organization in Singapore, and we actively decided to be a non-profit organization because we were putting purpose over profit as a priority. Now, I can tell you, had we done profit over purpose, we would have sold Playum 5 times over because we have a fantastic model. And therefore, it is incredibly important to redirect resources towards purpose-driven organization. But here's the reason why. I'd like to challenge the first point around scale, because in purpose-led organization, if you're in the business of making sure every person has good over profit, or achieve the benefits of your venture, as we do in Playum, you will look at your entire model that ensures dissemination, exponential dissemination. And that was the replication example that I gave. Jimmy Wales open sourced his platform. And when you start saying you're open sourcing your platform, a private equity play is not going to come in because how are you then generating revenue? Oh, it's ad sales. What does that look like? And then you start the model starts breaking down. So you can scale. For purpose-led organizations, you are able to scale your organization. You are able to go exponential. But you also need unrestricted resource to be able to do that.
Can I respond to
Thank
that
you.
as well?
I think you have another 40 seconds, so go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm going to slightly disagree with you there, Sumitra. Because when we talk about scale, sustainable scale, we're not talking about the Silicon Valley model of exponential scale. Like I said in my presentation, exponential scale doesn't end well in finite systems. But we can scale organically. We can scale horizontally. If the idea is not to concentrate wealth and power in the hands of very few, and if we let go of the things that we're building, and it means that people can scale. Like what I'm building, I don't say is the right solution for Singapore, because I don't know what the right solution for you is. But you can take what I'm building and make it your own, and then we scale that way, and that's non-colonial, that's non-exponential. That's what we need.
Okay, thank you. Just sometimes when I listen to the debate and the discussion, I wonder whether the motion is entrepreneurs do more harm than good, or venture capital is doing more harm than good. I see many heads nodding. Oh, great. Okay, so you guys are catching on to that. So let's remember the motion is about entrepreneurs. So you guys have 2 minutes. Any response to the points raised, or you can forego the time?
I mean, briefly, I thank you for the observation. I thank you for the comments. Right. I reiterate, what we would like to do is to take individual experiences, insights, but also look rigorously over long periods of time, 20, 30 years of capital investments, return to society, and take a balanced view stepping back on this. Obviously, individual experiences, opinions, and expertise will give you insights as well, and we combine this with large sample evidence. And as I said, in countries after countries, in 15 countries, and I can cite many more studies, the dollar invested by venture capitalists leads to productivity for society in terms of more jobs, more capable people, failed ventures, patents, and other things that are left there create further balance and further things that lead to innovation, right? So we can always have opinions of how this can go. Large sample evidence shows us this is the case. Dollar invested in entrepreneur by venture capitalists leads to $3.33 of return.
1 minute. Okay. You have one more minute. Anybody else? You want to add to that, Tim?
The only point I would add is that where I think a university has a role is that
universities do spin out companies. And I think what they can do is provide a partnership model for that entrepreneur and provide a scale and level of support that that entrepreneur as an individual doesn't always have. And I think as a consequence, they can counter some of the negative effects harmful effects you talked about by retaining an interest in the organisation going forward. And so where I think universities can mitigate some of the issues that you've raised is by maintaining an interest in the business once it's spun out.
Acting as stewards.
Yeah,
Thank
exactly.
you for that. I just wonder whether you could take a quick look at the votes so far. And so this is a good time for you guys to be punching in all your... oh, wow!
Come on, Dixon. I think Dixon did it.
Wow, this is amazing. So, yeah, the number of you agreeing with the proposition has gone up. So it looks like the SMU team is now even more in the hot spot. Okay, any of you from, especially those who disagree, who want to, mount your arguments and put the speakers on the spot? Questions, comments, contributions? Yes, the gentleman over there.
Hi, I'm Ian, a J1 student. There was some talk about breaking monopolies, and as well as having social opportunity, and as well as social entrepreneurs being the remedy to destructive entrepreneurism. So this is not really a point, but just a two-part question. So the first part is, what kind of support can governments give to social entrepreneurs to overcome barriers to entry against giants such as the Silicon Valley tech giants? And the second part is, but how do governments draw the line such that they don't end up mollycoddling such social entrepreneurs? Thank you.
What was the second part of the question, sorry?
The first part was about support for social entrepreneurs to overcome barriers to entry, and the second part was how governments draw the line to prevent the mollycoddling of these social entrepreneurs.
Okay. All right. Would you mind if I take that?
Yeah.
To start?
Okay.
And then, please.
Yeah, why don't I?
You can start, of course.
Singapore
Yeah,
context.
sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So maybe just to report largely from the Singapore context, right? And then I'll do this quickly. I think the first thing would be to recognize our business model is different. When you're advancing purpose and profit, sustainability, I'm not going to use the word profit, sustainability, your business model looks different. And so the first thing governments can do and policymakers can do is not force fit or retrofit old world enterprise-based business models and KPIs onto purpose-led organizations, because that will stifle innovation and that creates an unnatural balance and force to the development of the entities. The second thing is around mollycoddling. I think we've been too worried for too long around moral hazards. Social entrepreneurs, at least the ones we define as social entrepreneurs, are intrinsically motivated, or often intrinsically motivated, to use entrepreneurial approaches to eradicate the problem. Not to just solve, but to eradicate the problem. When you're driven with that intrinsic motivation, then I think it's about creating platforms and making sure you don't have policies or structures that are limiting rather than concerning around mollycoddling. Sorry.
Could I just
1
speak
minute.
up?
Yeah, 1 minute.
Okay. What I want to say is, this is what I said at the European Parliament when I spoke there. I was telling them, look, you are investing in startups. In Europe, we invest in startups. If those startups succeed, they get bought by Google or Facebook, or they become a Google or Facebook, right? Mostly they get bought. If they fail, the European taxpayer foots the bill. They get hit with the bill. So why are we doing this? We've become an unpaid research and development department for Silicon Valley. Why don't we instead invest not in equity? We don't have to do equity investment. Why don't we invest in the success, long-term sustainability of businesses? Use what we know works. Invest in 20 organizations, not-for-profit organizations maybe, to work on a problem, to iterate, to fail fast, to do all the things that we know work, but remove the toxic element, the exit, the need to sell, the need to be $1 billion and to have a couple of people make $1 billion ready. You said that we look at the balance, etc. But we live in a very unbalanced world where 8 people today have as much wealth as half of the world's population combined. That's not sustainable. That's not something we should be perpetuating.
Okay, you guys?
So, thank you for the question. I think the question's really interesting. What we tell at SMU and tell to our students is, and I say this is, first focus on value creation. Are you creating value? Then we'll look at, can you capture this value? I tell them, if you can capture this value, go to SMU IIE. If you can't capture this value, you're making the society better off, go to our Leon Center for Social Entrepreneurship. But first, create value. Right? So there are pathways to this. I think policymakers should recognize the total value creation for society and individuals, and because the value is increased for society, then they should think about how we can assess this model. Right? But that's the broad answer which I tell in my class and tell everywhere. So I thank you for those questions, for raising this up. More fundamentally, though, is you are dealing with humans. We are humans. Anesthesia and hand washing both came about same time. Surgeons did not wash their hands for nearly 50 years, killed people after people. But they built a super specialization, they ran services, they set up schools with anesthesia, right? Human models work when there is an incentive to work. We are dealing with humans, right? Human entrepreneurs, human subjects, right? We cannot take away incentives, private gain out and expect this to run.
Timothy?
I suppose I want to, my theme really is to broaden our sense and conversation around what is entrepreneurship. The two companies that I've been involved in spinning out, one is a surface chemical company that basically developed the chemistry for a touch screen, okay? That came out of a university, that came out of the university that I used to work at. The new super material is graphene. Graphene, and there are lots of spin-out companies in relation to graphene. So our role in terms of innovation, in terms of what a university does going forward, is to really push the boundaries of knowledge and understanding. It isn't necessarily working in the digital space, it's working in a whole variety of spaces, and that's where the social benefits are coming from. Universities are the place where graphene was identified. Graphene is going to become the future material. We are about pushing the boundaries of understanding and pushing the space beyond where we currently appreciate it.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes more for questions, but I think I'm supposed to get 10 minutes for my remarks, so I'm handing them all back to you. So we have about 10 minutes? About 15 minutes for questions. I think your questions are much more interesting than whatever summation I can give. Yes, questions? Yes, the lady in front.
My name is Shirley. I was an entrepreneur, and I'm now an entrepreneur in residence with SMU. I'm also a VC, all right? Okay, but I'm not going to talk anything about a VC. I'm basically giving comments about my observation, and perhaps throw this to the debaters for your comments as well. As we all know, startup in fact globally, everybody believes that startup is going to fuel the economy, all right, and that's going to make a major change in the whole from an economic standpoint. And as a result, especially so even in Singapore, that we see more and more startups are being born, almost on a daily basis. And with that, there are, as you know, that there are comments that says that if you want to fail fast, or you want to die fast. The reason is because, many of the startups, they are actually hoarding manpower, all right? And especially in Singapore, we are anemic in our manpower, especially in tech resources. But many entrepreneurs still hold true to their original, their passion, and that is, exhibiting the trait of being tenacious as well as the resiliency, and that's the result why they do not want to fail fast, because they believe that perhaps, if they stay long enough, they could see success, of their venture.
Could I ask you to come to your point?
So my question is that, do you agree that startups today, entrepreneurs today, are actually hoarding precious resources, and as a result, it's actually causing more harm to the industry because there is already not enough talents that's out there?
Very good, very specific point. Yes, who wants to respond to that?
Can I take it?
Yes.
Yeah, this goes exactly to what I said about investment. all of our investment is going to startups. So they have the money to employ the manpower, and we know what the business models are. So, you know, the brightest minds of our generation are trying to figure out better ways of spying on you and better ways to monetize your person. And I think in some ways, we're not going to fix this problem if we can't see beyond business, if we can't see beyond profit, if we cannot see us as anything but consumers, if we can't see us as people first, if we don't start talking about human rights, not just monopolies and antitrust, but what about our human rights? This really comes down to each one of us individually. I don't care what corporation you work for, that doesn't define you. I don't care how you make your money. What kind of world do you want to live in? Is it a world where 8 mostly white men have half of the world's wealth and decide how you live? Or is it a world where we, as individuals, have much more of a say in that, we have agency in that, because that's not the world we're creating. And when we talk about value creation, the thing that we're not talking about is that distribution of that value that's created, because capitalism is about the centralization of that value that's created. What kind of world would we have if we distributed that more equally, more fairly? I think what we fail to see is that we have an emergency right now. We have a climate emergency, we have an equality emergency, and we're still talking about nuance and balance. We need to start really tackling the emergency that we have as a species.
Wow. Okay. Any response? No? Okay. So you guys have 1 minute if you want to address this issue. Startups are hoarding manpower.
So let me respond to the specific question, right? Not a general statement. The specific question is startups, especially in Singapore context, holding on and persisting. I think entrepreneurship is a very difficult process, and having stepped into entrepreneurship, admitting failure and letting go is a bigger process. In some societies, failure is okay, accepted. Being a failed entrepreneur is not a bad thing. It might be in a badge of something you've tried. But here I think we need to change our acceptance of failing and failing an entrepreneur. I think this would help us to recognize that entrepreneurship is risky. Even the best intentions and the people with the best ideas fail because they can't control all the stochastic elements, resources that they lack. Right? So it's a risky process. So if you want this process to go, then we think about counseling them so that they don't suffer depressions, they don't have, God forbid, suicidal thoughts. Right? We support entrepreneurs to have a process view of what milestones they would expect to hear, how they go through this process, and then have a balanced view that they can say when to pull the plug. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm supposed to wrap up the debate now. Let's take a look at the votes. Wow, okay. There's been a distinct shift, so it looks like the proposition team has managed to shift many of your opinions. So we have 51% agreeing and 48% disagreeing. So do I call the end of the debate?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to just spend 2 minutes just summing up, and then you can, think through, plan, and press your button at the end. I mean, before the end of those 2 minutes, you can consult, lobby your friends or whatever. I think we've had a very interesting discussion, and there's been a surprising amount of coherence in the arguments within each team. So on the one hand, we have heard that entrepreneurs do more harm than good. The surveillance capitalism model really sucks. People farming. The current model is centered around us losing our privacy, human rights, there are data breaches, and the whole venture capital system is really toxic. And not only that, but startups, big tech, not only sucks up money, but they also suck up manpower. So there's a proposition from the team that we need to redefine entrepreneurship to a more social model. On the other hand, opposing the motion, we have the team from SMU and the Ngee Ann Polytechnic alumnus, who argue that actually there's nothing seriously wrong with the current system. There are some problems, around the fringes, but those can be easily fixed with more entrepreneurship. And if you look at what entrepreneurship really is, it's about the manufacture and the spread of ideas, and those unambiguously have created better societies. And we heard from our young debaters that actually entrepreneurs help you get good better goods and services, help you make money, help you save money, and all in all create a better world. Now let's take a final look at the debate outcome. All right, I think we have a winner. So the team that is proposing the motion is a winner with 52.2%, and those who disagree, okay, never mind, it's around that, it's about 46%. Okay, so, but I would say, as in all things, and this being a university, I'm told that there is no winner or loser in this debate, because a university is a place and a forum for discussion of ideas and robust exchanges, and I think that's what we have seen this morning. So I would just like to, say that, I'd just like to call the debate to a close, and thank all of you for participating. This is not the end of the event. This is just, the end of the debate. So I think I'm supposed to, am I supposed to get everybody off stage or not yet? Not yet, okay. I'm just, so this brings the debate to a close. And I just want to use my prerogative again as moderator, 30-second commercial break. We have our publishers, Straits Times Press, just outside the room. They've set up a lovely long table, a kiosk where they are marketing our books. So do please spend a few minutes there. And I'm told that the books are being offered at a very, very special price for you guys because you are so special and delightful. I have a vested interest because one of my books is on sale, but there are many, many other books there. Including by, Kishore and Nobila Hari, and then there are also books about Inuka, our star polar bear. So do please spend a few minutes looking at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Chua Mui Hong. Now, it has been an absolutely exciting debate, as you can see with the scores. And at this point, we'd also like to give thanks to our wonderful panel of debaters for that lively discussion. So please give them a big round of applause as well. And of course, this debate here today, this forum here today would not be successful without every single one of you. Thank you for being so engaging as an audience. Thank you for your questions and your comments and your observations. Please give yourselves a big round of applause as well. At this point, I would also like to call our panelists and moderators to remain on stage for a gift presentation and a group photo. For this, I would like to invite on stage Professor Lily Kong and Mr. Warren Fernandez to join this group photo. For the rest of us, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We have now come to the end of the program today. We hope you have found this year's Straits Times Education Forum most interesting and enriching. Do feel free to take your conversations and discussions outside while you're having lunch. On behalf of the Singapore Management University and the Straits Times, we hope you found this year's, we would like to thank all of you for participating in this forum and coming down on a Saturday morning. Now, before you head out for lunch, or as you're heading out for lunch, I would like to also do a quick announcement. As Ms. Chua mentioned, the Straits Times has a booth outside, and they are selling a couple of books written by ST journalists. So you can get them at level 2, just right outside the lunch catering area, and you can get them at a very interesting and special discount here today. So, ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy lunch that's happening at level 2. We have a great array of food lined up for you guys, and also ensure that you've taken your goodie bag and your belongings before you leave. And Ms. Chua has very diligently told me to tell you guys to look out for the report in the Straits Times tomorrow. So once again, thank you so much for coming down here today on a Saturday morning, and I hope you guys have enjoyed yourselves. Thank you.